On February 28, 2026, the geopolitical landscape of the Middle East fundamentally shifted. Following months of rising tensions, covert operations, and diplomatic deadlocks, the region entered a phase of open, direct military confrontation involving Iran, Israel, and the United States. The morning began with a series of coordinated strikes conducted by the Israel Defense Forces, with the official strategic backing of the United States. These strikes were aimed at what officials described as critical military and strategic infrastructure deep within Iranian territory. Almost immediately, the government in Tehran closed its airspace to all civilian traffic and initiated a large-scale retaliatory launch of ballistic missiles and drone swarms targeting Israeli territory and American military installations across the region. Sirens sounded, emergency protocols were activated, and the world watched as a decades-long shadow war stepped out into the open light. In moments like this, the internet floods with propaganda, emotional appeals, and aggressive rhetoric from all sides. But to actually understand what is happening, we have to strip away the emotion. We have to look at this conflict purely through the lens of geopolitics, military strategy, and global economics. This is not a video about who is right or who is wrong. This is a breakdown of the strategic objectives, the military capabilities, and the global consequences of the war that has just begun. To understand the events of today, we first have to understand the core strategic imperatives driving each of the three major players. Nations do not go to war by accident. They go to war when they believe their fundamental survival or core interests are at stake. Let us start with Israel. From a geographical perspective, Israel is a very small country without strategic depth. An enemy fighter jet crossing its border can reach major population centers in a matter of minutes. Because of this geographic vulnerability, Israeli military doctrine has historically relied on two pillars: overwhelming deterrence and the preemptive strike. Israel operates on the belief that a nuclear-armed Iran, or an Iran capable of mass-producing advanced precision-guided munitions for its proxy network, represents an unacceptable existential threat. The Israeli objective in this current escalation is not necessarily regime change or territorial conquest. It is degradation. The goal is to physically dismantle Iranian nuclear facilities, destroy missile production factories, and cripple the command and control structures that coordinate regional militias. From Israel's perspective, this preemptive action is a necessary calculation to secure the long-term survival of the state in a highly hostile neighborhood. On the other side of the chessboard is Iran. To understand Iran's strategy, you have to look at its history and geography. Iran is surrounded by heavily armed neighbors and numerous United States military bases. Knowing it could not win a conventional symmetrical war against the combined high-tech air forces of the US and Israel, Tehran spent decades developing a strategy known as forward defense. Instead of fighting enemies on its own borders, Iran built, funded, and armed a vast network of allied militias across Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Yemen. This created a ring of deterrence. Furthermore, Iran's domestic missile and nuclear programs are viewed by its leadership as the ultimate insurance policies against foreign invasion. For Tehran, the objective in this conflict is regime survival, asserting its dominance as the primary regional power, and imposing such a high cost on Israel and the United States that they are forced to abandon their attempts to contain Iranian influence. When Iran fires retaliatory salvos, it is sending a mathematical message. An attack on Iranian soil will be met with a symmetrical, overwhelming response. Then there is the United States. America's involvement is driven by a mix of treaty obligations, historical alliances, and global economic interests. The U.S. has a long-standing commitment to ensuring Israel's qualitative military edge in the region. But beyond alliances, the United States operates as the guarantor of global maritime trade. The Persian Gulf is the central artery of the world's energy supply. If an adversary gains the ability to shut down that artery, it gains leverage over the entire global economy. The U.S. objective is to protect its regional allies, deter Iranian expansion, and maintain the free flow of commerce, all while trying to prevent a regional war from spiraling into a global catastrophe that requires a massive deployment of American ground troops. When we look at the actual mechanics of this war, we are witnessing a textbook clash between conventional supremacy and asymmetric warfare. The military equation here is asymmetrical by design. The United States and Israel possess total conventional superiority. They control the skies. The Israeli Air Force operates highly advanced F-35 stealth fighters, capable of bypassing legacy radar systems. The United States brings strategic bombers, naval carrier strike groups, and unmatched satellite intelligence that provides real-time targeting data anywhere on Earth. Their strategy relies on precision. Using specialized bunker-busting munitions, the U.S.-Israeli coalition aims to penetrate the deep fortified underground facilities where Iran houses its most critical assets. Defensively, this coalition relies on the most sophisticated multi-layered air defense networks on the planet, including the Iron Dome, David's Sling, and the Arrow 3 systems, designed to intercept everything from short-range rockets to exo-atmospheric ballistic missiles. However, Iran's military was specifically built to counter this exact high-tech advantage. Iran knows it cannot win a fighter jet dogfight. Instead, it relies on geography and volume. Iran is a massive mountainous country. It has buried its most sensitive nuclear and military sites, like the Fordow enrichment plant, deep inside mountains, protected by hundreds of feet of solid rock, making them incredibly difficult to destroy even with advanced American munitions. Offensively, Iran relies on the concept of saturation. They possess the largest and most diverse ballistic and cruise missile arsenal in the Middle East, along with thousands of cheap, mass-produced suicide drones. The strategy is simple mathematics. No air defense system has an unlimited supply of interceptor missiles. An Iron Dome interceptor costs roughly $50,000, an Arrow 3 missile costs millions, an Iranian Shahed drone costs about $20,000. If Iran and its regional allies launch massive simultaneous swarms of cheap drones mixed with heavy ballistic missiles, the goal is to exhaust the interceptor stockpiles of the US and Israel. Once the defensive shield is depleted, the heavier, more destructive missiles can hit their targets. It is a war of attrition, pitting expensive defense against cheap, mass-produced defense. But the most critical aspect of this conflict is not what happens in the skies over Tel Aviv or Tehran. It is what happens in a narrow stretch of water that connects the Persian Gulf to the open ocean. The Strait of Hormuz. If you live in Europe, Asia, or the Americas and think a war in the Middle East does not affect you, the Strait of Hormuz is the reason you are wrong. At its narrowest point, this strait is only 21 miles wide, and the shipping lanes are just 2 miles wide in either direction. Yet, approximately 20 to 30% of the world's total oil consumption passes through this tiny bottleneck every single day. It is the single most important geopolitical choke point on planet Earth. As part of its asymmetrical defense strategy, Iran borders the entire northern coast of this strait. In the event of an all-out war aimed at crippling the Iranian state, Tehran has the geographic capability to shut this strait down. They do not need massive naval destroyers to do this. Using thousands of cheap naval mines, swarms of fast-attack speedboats armed with explosives and hidden anti-ship missile batteries nestled in the coastline mountains, Iran can make the passage of commercial oil tankers impossible. If the Strait of Hormuz is closed, or even if insurance companies simply refuse to cover ships traveling through a war zone, the global energy market will experience a shock unseen since the 1970s. Global oil prices could instantly skyrocket, potentially doubling or tripling in a matter of days. This is not just about the cost of gasoline at the pump. Everything in the modern world requires oil to be manufactured and transported. A spike in energy prices would immediately trigger a massive wave of global inflation. Factories in Asia would face soaring production costs. European economies already dealing with energy transitions would face severe recessions. The cost of food, electronics, and basic goods worldwide would surge. This is the ultimate leverage. Iran knows that a prolonged disruption of the global economy puts immense political pressure on the United States and its allies to end the conflict quickly. The U.S. military, in turn, has plans to secure the strait, but clearing thousands of underwater mines while under constant anti-ship missile fire is a slow, dangerous, and incredibly costly operation. So, where does this leave us, and how does this end? In geopolitical game theory, conflicts like this play out on what is called an escalation ladder. Every strike by one side requires a counterstrike by the other to maintain deterrence and save face. The danger of February 28, 2026, is that all sides have simultaneously moved several rungs up this ladder. There are two primary scenarios for how this plays out. The first is the calculated de-escalation. In this scenario, the initial waves of strikes and counterstrikes are highly calibrated. Israel and the U.S. hit specific predetermined military targets. Iran responds with a massive, highly visible missile barrage that causes enough damage to satisfy its domestic audience and regional allies, but avoids causing massive civilian casualties. Once both sides have demonstrated their strength and resolved their immediate deterrence needs, they use back-channel diplomacy, often through third-party nations like Oman or Qatar, to quietly agree to step back from the brink. The war remains an intense but short-lived exchange of fire. The second scenario is uncontrolled escalation. In the fog of war, precision is a myth. A single miscalculation, an American missile hitting a civilian center in Iran, or an Iranian ballistic missile evading air defenses and destroying an Israeli hospital or a U.S. aircraft carrier, forces an uncontrollable reaction. In this scenario, the gloves come off. The U.S. commits fully to a campaign to destroy Iranian infrastructure. Iran successfully blocks the Strait of Hormuz and unleashes its proxy network to attack borders on all sides, and the conflict spirals into a multi-year regional war that drags the global economy into a severe depression. War is a failure of diplomacy, and once it begins, it takes on a life and a logic of its own. As the sirens sound and the missiles fly, the leaders in Washington, Tel Aviv, and Tehran are calculating their next moves on a chessboard where one wrong step guarantees mutual destruction. The coming days will determine not just the fate of the Middle East, but the economic and political stability of the entire world. We will continue to analyze the facts, the strategies, and the data as this situation develops. If you want to understand the mechanics of global power without the noise of propaganda, subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching.